this very important bill. The crimes that Vanessa George committed to those babies and toddlers in the constituency I represent at Little Ted's nursery were simply disgusting. They abhor any right-minded person, and it doesn't need a partisan label, a party political badge to know that this is a good piece of natural justice, a law that should be supported by everyone of all parties. The particular cases around Vanessa George I set out in the second reading debate, but on behalf of the families, those that were able to come forward, I want to thank the Minister and his ministerial colleagues for the way that they have brought forward this campaign. It would be very easy for a government to ignore a campaign from an opposition MP. And I'm grateful for the ministers who have not done that, who have looked at the victims, who have looked at the severity of the crimes involved and have acted accordingly in what is right. Vanessa George still shows no remorse for the crimes that she committed, no remorse in the fact that she still refuses to name the children that she abused. We don't know how many children at Little Ted's nursery she did abuse, because she hasn't told anyone. We know how many children were there, and we have a good idea about which children might have been exposed to her cruel and evil crimes. Those children are now fast emerging young people that are coming to terms with their place in the world, the way that they feel, and the crimes that were committed to them and by Vanessa George on them as children will have long-lasting psychological and in some cases physical consequences for them in the future. By not knowing whether they were a victim themselves, it deprives not only the families of the peace of mind of knowing, but it also deprives that child of the help and support they might otherwise have been able to access in terms of being able to have that peace of mind of knowing what happened to them. Uncertainty is a prison in which those children and their families will be in for quite some time. On the amendment itself, the issue that was raised by my own friend, member opposite, in relation to life sentences, the families don't mind what the sentence is. Anyone who declines to name the children they abuse should not be able to be released early. And I think, in particular, the question about whether it is a life sentence that's passed for an offence of taking an indecent image of a child or a relevant offence of an indecent pseudo-image of a child, I'd be grateful if the Minister could set out whether that also applies to contemporaneous charges, because in many cases it would be very unlikely that a life sentence would be passed for taking those images, but a life sentence might be passed for the indecent images and the act of abuse themselves. And so whether that collection of charges falls under that description in 1A, 1 and 2 in this amendment or not, because I think it's really important that on behalf of the families I try to get as robust a bill as we possibly can here, because the experience of those families, of not knowing, of going to the nursery, of being told in the first instance that their child, a baby or a toddler, may have been abused, the images shared with a network of paedophiles, and the uncertainty of not knowing whether it was their child, but also the crushing uncertainty of thinking that an image of their child being abused might still be on a paedophile's hard drive somewhere on some rotten corner of the dark web. Now, that is something that is a demon that sits with these families for quite some time, and anything that we can do to make this bill as robust as we possibly can, I think would be welcome in respect of that. Vanessa George received a novel sentence at the time in relation to her crimes. That complicated the case in terms of it being an indeterminate sentence, and that was something that the Parole Board addressed when they tried to make their judgment around it. I think this legislation will go a long way to prevent an early release of someone like Vanessa George in the future. But what it also does is sends a very clear message to those people that are abusing children, that if you refuse to name the children in which you're abusing, then you will not be released early. And in fact, actually, that additional reticence, that hesitation, that refusal to come forward with that information will be regarded negatively by the Parole Board when it's considered in the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, on behalf of all the families, I want to put on record their thanks for the swift action that ministers have taken here. Parliament and politics often gets a bad name, but when ministers have responded so swiftly and in such a decent way to a campaign that was so important to those families in Plymouth, I want to thank them and encourage this bill to have a swift process through the rest of its stages in Parliament.